counts thousands of illegal immigrants among its ranks. But first, the protest honor roll. That's the focus of tonight's angle. With some curiosity, I watched students and administrators and some left-wing politicians take part in a national walkout to advocate for gun control
today.
This,
really. So, but what did you? It's propaganda.
What Parkland showed us
Fence
is that this could happen in any one of our schools. And we
was going to weigh in on shiftless Adam Schiff. Straight ahead.
1 month after the high school shooting in Parkland, Florida, kids at more than 2,000 schools across the nation staged these walkouts. But don't be fooled into thinking this was some sort of organic outpouring of youthful rage. This was a totally choreographed event organized by a group called Empower. It's the youth wing of the Women's March.
Ongoing training
thank God they didn't force the kids to wear those idiotic pink knit caps.
Keep your HR career on the move.
But you got to hand it to them, really. Come on, leftists do know how to organize and protest.
I am ready.
Students took part by the thousands.
I am SHRM certified.
Who needs Homer in history
Learn
when you
more
can
at
get credit for screaming?
SHRM certified.
Well, naturally, they were enabled by a familiar cast of characters.
My friend. Sunday nights, Life, Liberty, the great one. Levin, congrats, #1 in the ratings 3 weekends in a row. When we come back, Democrats, are they finally over Hillary Clinton? Jesse Waters and Jessica Tarla. We'll find out whose world it is. Straight ahead, you get to vote.
We're all moved by your eloquence and your fearless insistence on action to prevent gun violence. Thank you for bringing your urgency to this fight to the doorstep of America.
Okay. Look, you've heard of, like, you take your child to work day.
My film,
well, for the anti-Trump, anti-Second Amendment crowd, this was Make Your Student Protest Day.
Follow me on Instagram.
Like, there's nothing worse than people who use their kids to advance a political agenda. Like, many school districts, teachers, administrators, and local politicians supported this walkout. The demonstrations were supposed to last 17 minutes to honor each of the Parkland victims. But some of these things went on for hours, and sometimes they took on an even festival kind of party atmosphere. In New York, students marched on the, of course, Trump International Hotel and at the Brooklyn Borough Hall. In D.C., you saw that clip. They gathered at the U.S. Capitol and at the White House.
For the Democrats,
we will accept nothing less than comprehensive gun control.
Kissing a contestant.
And if it's what it takes,
I have a message for
we
King.
will shame our national policymakers into protecting us. When the commander-in-chief solution to this country's gun problem is more guns, you know we have a moral problem in this White House. This is in our hands now. And if any elected official gets in our way, we will vote them out and replace them ourselves.
That's nonpartisan completely. The mention of Trump, just ignore that. Oh, my goodness. So much for honoring the victims.
Take over.
This was nothing but a left-wing anti-Trump diatribe. You peel it all back. And it could have been written by anyone at MoveOn.org. While a significant number of liberal educrats supported the walkout politicking, a few administrators and teachers actually had, I think, a better idea, like the ones who called into my radio show this morning.
As a conservative social studies teacher, I had mixed emotions about the walkouts today, but I did make time at the end of the period for those students that walked out to kind of air their opinions, and we had a really good dialogue. I was really surprised to find out that they understand that it's more than just gun control. It's more the mental health, parents needing to be present in their kids' lives and to address the issues of bullying.
Our struggling public schools did have their walkouts, but our parochial school teachers worked with the students and put together a program of a walk-in. And they went into the churches and auditoriums and recognized the victims with prayer.
I really like that. Think about that. Commemorating the loss, remembering the victims, prayer offered as a class. To me, that makes a lot more sense than yelling into a microphone in front of some government building. We're talking about students here. And for anyone who takes the time to look at our academic standing in the world, students need more academics, more classroom time, not more hysterics. According to the latest Pew survey, American 15-year-olds rank 38th out of 71 countries in math and 24th in science. Places like Singapore, Poland, Portugal, and Macau beat us by huge margins. And we're worrying about protests and walkouts? We need sit-ins, as in sit in class and learn. Let's be clear here. Democrats are using these kids to whip up enthusiasm for the midterms, 2020 and beyond, and, of course, for voter registration. It's theater with real-world consequences. Because I'm telling you, when these placards are trashed and the TV producers stop calling, Johnny still won't be able to read as well as some of those other countries, maybe not write as well, or distinguish between a polynomial and a polywog. Political activism is terrific. I love it. But it should not be conducted during the school day. So if you kids want to protest, have at it. And it'd probably be better after you graduate from high school. But for now, your education and your studies are far more important than any march, even if the politicians and the activists try to convince you otherwise. And that's the angle. The Chicago Republican Party is filing a lawsuit over these walkouts from the Chicago Public Schools. And to tell us why is the chairman of the Chicago GOP, Chris Cleveland, and also joining us is Jitu Brown, the national director for the Journey for Justice Alliance, one of the organizers of the walkout. Gentlemen, it's great to see both of you. Let's start with you, Chris. The lawsuit has not yet been filed, I understand, although you did file a complaint. What is the beef? I mean, these kids are just organically getting together and expressing their First Amendment views.
Well, that's not exactly what the situation is, though. The nature of our complaint with the Inspector General's office was that these teachers and administrators in the public schools were using taxpayer dollars to advance a political agenda. Now, that's not just distasteful, it's not improper. I mean, it's not only improper, it's illegal, too. It's contrary to Chicago Public Schools rules. It's contrary to Illinois state law that says that you can't just write taxpayer checks to political movements. And, it's arguably a violation of their First Amendment rights because there's kids who are coerced into doing this who may not agree.
G2, I understand that the children who did not want to take part in the walkout were instructed they could gather in a classroom, they didn't have to hear it, they didn't have to go to it. But classes were canceled during this period of the school day. Why is that good for the kids today who need, frankly, more classroom time and more focus on their studies?
I think that we have to remember that one of the things that education has to be is relevant. And so if we talk about what makes good education, that means a curriculum that's rigorous, a curriculum that's relevant, and a curriculum that engages young people in a way that's creative and in a way that inspires them. So I think when young people have real world issues about like being afraid of being killed in their neighborhood or being afraid of being killed with someone bringing an automatic weapon into their school, that it is not about a partisan issue. It's about young people, and I know the young people that I engaged with who were passionate about letting their voice be heard during this time. There are young people from my community who have been working on issues like this for years, and I think, have not received the support from mainstream media that young people from Parkland received. But I know that this was not an issue of at least from the young people and the people that I've engaged with, this is not about young people being parroted or manipulated by adults. I think that's kind of insulting. We have to remember that, there was a time when, you couldn't host a show like this. There was a time when I couldn't sit on a TV channel like this. And there was young people who pushed the establishment to say this is what the moral issue of the day must be.
So we cannot. Right. Mm-hmm. So, G2, I hear what you're saying. My concern is, and my point in the angle was, the idea that this is just a bunch of students getting together and this was all student-driven. Well, to some extent, there were some students, obviously, have heartfelt views. I get it. It's not about whether you have the right to protest. It's about whether schools should be used to advance a political agenda, and it is a political agenda, that a lot of parents and a lot of students do not feel comfortable with and feel excluded from. And I don't think, G2, you probably would have been all that thrilled if the march was an anti-abortion march, that students were encouraged to attend. There were things sent around like this email from an elementary school teacher in Chicago yesterday. Feel free to join in the morning from 10 to 11 a.m. outside for a walkout and informative action. You are more than welcome to spread the word, to tell family, friends, and the media. Sarah Fowler, middle school literacy teacher, Jonathan Burr Elementary School. I don't think if that agenda was a conservative agenda or a pro-life agenda, would have all this woo from the mainstream media, interviewing them, putting them on TV. Do you think that?
Well, I will say if you thought that I was going to come on this show and say that this is a Republican issue, then you're mistaken. I think the issue, the failure to address the gun violence in the United States is a bipartisan failure. Is a failure by Democrats or Republicans. So for those who stood outside with young people today, the work is not finished.
But you didn't answer my question. G2, you didn't answer my question. Okay. You said it wasn't a Republican. I'm not even saying it's a Republican thing. I am saying it's political. And if this were a massive push for a pro-life rally that was nationwide, pushed by the Catholic Church or other organizations that weren't political, I do not think would have groups allied with the teachers' unions and other organizations cheering the students on. I think they'd say, well, a lot of kids don't agree with the pro-life thing. A lot of kids are pro-choice. Why would you push that? There have been 55 million babies who were not born in the United States because of that movement. That's a lot of bloodshed. But I don't think that a lot of people would be thrilled about that. So, Chris, you want to file a lawsuit, perhaps. It does seem to be contrary to the policies that I've read in the Chicago School District. But nevertheless, this is a very popular movement. I think G2 is right. Gun violence is a big problem in Chicago. We've had a lot of lives lost. And there are a lot of different solutions, not just grabbing guns, but there are a lot of different solutions that are being embraced by students.
Well, I don't know that that's actually the case. I mean, what I'm seeing here is coercion. I'm seeing that the kids are being encouraged to fill out these posters and go out and protest and urge their congressman to vote for stronger gun laws. And this business that they're not being coerced is absurd. I mean, kids in our elementary school, I actually became attuned to this because I received an email from our principal at our elementary school. Kids ages in grades 5 through 8 were being herded outside to do this. Here we get 10, 12-year-old kids who are told that if you don't want to do it, you can go sit in a room by yourself, and all your friends are going to be outside doing this. I mean, this is straight out coercion, and it's straight out a left-wing agenda. So, I mean, it's crystal clear that it's paid for by taxpayer dollars, and this is improper.
G2.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an insult to young people to say that in order for them to raise their voice in a way that is passionate, that is clear, that somehow they have to be manipulated by adults. I remind you that it was young.
Come on.
G2, they're kids.
What 10-year-old kid is going to be able to know how to argue this or even understand the issue? They don't understand this issue.
See, and I think that, so I will say this. I'm not in every classroom, but I will say this. The overwhelming majority of young people that you see speaking around the country, the young people in Chicago who walked out of their schools and then went to the mayor's office on a Democrat.
Aren't they supposed to be in school?
Yes,
and that is civic engagement. Aren't these kids supposed to be getting skills to get jobs and to be independent adults? I mean, there's plenty of time for political activism, G2.
And civic schools are where young people are together. So I'm not advocating for like daily walkouts, but I think when issues become critical, when young people are screaming to us, whether it is through gun violence in the street or whether it's through gun violence in their schools, and we are suffering from inertia, it is not our place to say whether they are correct or incorrect.
Well, it's our place. Actually, G2,
it's our place. It's actually our place.
Wait a second. Are you saying that adults do not have a role in guiding the actions of young people? Is that what you're saying?
I never said that. What I said was that when adults have failed to address quality life issues for young people, and young people raise their voices up, right? It is not for the establishment.
They can do that anytime they want. They can do that anytime they want, but not during the school day when other kids might not agree with the agenda.
So do you think that the people who worked at Woolworths liked it when young African Americans and white children sat in? And they sat in the lunch counters?
Okay, that issue is not a relevant issue at all. But
not relevant. Look.
Yeah, we're out of time. I get your point. And I celebrate political activism. G2 and Chris, I celebrate political activism. I think it's awesome. And I think a lot of kids were excited and they think they're, their voice. I get that. We're talking about the school day.
But that's not how you presented it. In your discourse, you all presented it as if.
It's a political issue, and it's being pushed by political groups that have an agenda and Democrat politicians that want to drive turnout. That was my point. It's not all political activism. It's great. But this is a school day. Kids got to learn. Kids got a lot to do. And a lot of kids don't agree with it. And I think that's intolerant, to make all kids feel like they have to take part in this or they're not part of the cool crowd.
I know young people in Chicago. I know young people in Chicago that did not walk out, and nobody pressured them. Nobody criticized them.
If it were a conservative issue being pushed, I think a lot of people would claim they were excluded and they felt like it was an intolerant atmosphere. That's why schools can't become political, because people disagree on these issues. They're very complicated. Constitutional laws involved. I was 12. I didn't know all that much about constitutional law, but maybe a lot of the kids today know a lot about constitutional law that I didn't know. Guys, great conversation. We're going to have you on for an hour. Thank you so much for joining us. And up next, apparently, "you're fired" have become dirty words. Is there a double standard in the way the media are covering Trump's cabinet changes? We're going to debate it up next. Oh, the left and the lamestream media, total meltdown over the firing of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. My question is, what took so long? Well, President Trump is looking for a cabinet that he says shares his vision. After 13 months, he kind of has the mojo going. He knows what he wants. I don't remember hearing the press complain when Barack Obama actually didn't move to fire aides that were either incompetent or just blowing it time after time, like former HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. She botched that whole Obamacare rollout. She wasn't fired. UN Ambassador Susan Rice stated outright falsehoods on like 5 national television shows about Benghazi, and she was given a lateral promotion over the National Security Council. And the list goes on and on. But guys, isn't this just smart organization? And it's all coming together now. Looking to analyze this now is Richard Goodstein, of course, former Hillary Clinton aide, and Byron York from the Washington Examiner. Great to see both of you. All right, Richard, I have to say I'm a little bit surprised that there's all this caterwauling about Tillerson. He called the president a moron, let's face it, last summer. He would never answer the question about whether he did or didn't. And the president didn't like that. And they didn't share the same vision on a lot of issues. So what's the big deal?
I think what the press is reacting to is the gutless way in which the president fired him. I think even his biggest defenders have to say that to put out to a former CEO of Exxon in a tweet.
Now you like Exxon, right?
Well, I'm just saying. This
Exxon.
This is a formidable guy, right? He ran a global operation. And in a tweet to basically communicate, as he did, frankly, with Reince Priebus and in his fairly gutless way with James Comey, this guy who took great pleasure in saying you're fired really doesn't have the spine.
So that's what you're all upset about. Do you remember how Obama fired Mattis?
Do
you remember? Did he do it face to face?
Well, I remember when he met with General McChrystal.
Did not fire Mattis. Mattis learned about it through the media.
Well,
he did not know he was fired. Never told. That's General Mattis.
Well, all I'm saying is.
So this kind of woo, I'm so outraged. Come on. I mean,
General Mattis was not in Barack Obama's cabinet. Okay?
He was the head of the Central Command.
I'm saying he was not in Barack Obama's cabinet.
Okay.
And Tillerson, again, what CEO is going to sign up to work for Donald Trump when they see Rex Tillerson dealt with like that?
I wouldn't have fired him that way, but he was told on Friday by Kelly he was out. I mean, he knew that when he's on his way to Africa or in Africa. He knew that. So. I would have done it differently. Fair criticism, but that's kind of a process deal. I mean, I don't know why Trump does that, but he does that. But Mattis got that bum's rush treatment from Obama, too. McChrystal was a patriot. He got knocked off. But is this a sign of real chaos? We got a lot of other changes. It looks like, Byron, are coming. Could this be too chaotic?
Well, first of all, you knew there were going to be first-year changes.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows that. It happens in other administrations. This administration has had a lot more changes than some of the others, so there's no doubt about that. But I think what has happened is that Trump has experimented in various places with bringing people in who had no governmental experience, and people who
How did that work out?
Well, sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't.
Most of the time it
example,
doesn't.
he's probably going to be looking for a new national security advisor. You really need somebody who knows how the government works.
Yeah, it looks like Bolton is probably, I mean, I'd guess Bolton is going to get that. John Bolton might
and
get
Bolton
that.
deeply understands how the government, the executive branch works.
Look at what he did at HHS. Tom Price, Dr. Price, well-respected guy, wasn't the best HHS secretary. He brings in Alex Azar, who was deputy HHS secretary for Bush, who was general counsel at HHS for Bush, ran one of the biggest divisions for Eli Lilly. The guy has an enormous amount of experience. He has a different approach now. It looks like he's going to move out. McMaster is going to move out. It's going to be Bolton. He's going to move Rick Perry out. Looks like he could put Ray Washburn, who would be a fabulous choice, in. He's going to then move out Shulkin, put Perry into Shulkin's role at VA. Like, Shulkin was out there, having fun in Europe on the taxpayers' dime. Like, what was that? He's an Obama holdover, though, right?
Look, Axios is reporting that White House staff basically don't know which end is up, right? The problem with Donald Trump is who he's hiring. In addition to who he's hiring foreign agents to be his national security advisor, to be his campaign manager. If you Googled them, you'd see where their allegiances were. That's the problem.
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn.
Oh, we're going to Manafort.
Well, I'm just saying that's the problem is who he brought in the first place. And obviously the way he's kind of dismissing people is not his finest hour.
You know what I think? I'm sorry, Byron, I'm going to interrupt, but I think it would be really good for him to bring in Chris Christie. And Chris Christie and Trump have a really good relationship. It sometimes can be feisty, but Christie has I know New Jersey, a lot of people didn't like it, but I just still think it's going to be Christie's time. That's my view. Watch Chris Christie. Go ahead.
Here's my prediction. There's a lot of time left.
Yeah.
That's going to happen.
That's going to happen at some point.
Think it will.
Christie is going to get hired at some point.
On the other hand, do look at Obama. And the examples you gave were pretty good. I mean, Susan Rice did some, she told clearly false stories repeatedly on national television.
They sent her out, didn't
Lois Lerner, improperly targeted conservative groups, was found in contempt of Congress. Kathleen Sebelius, the rollout of Obamacare was
nice website.
Disastrous.
Talk about
absolutely
a disaster.
disastrous. So there are a lot of people who made some major mistakes and did not lose their jobs over it.
John Kelly, I like General Kelly, but he's might be a change.
I cannot say that. And everybody thinks, where does he go? Where does the president go for a chief of staff after that?
No, I think that's a tough one. Great conversation. And later, why is the Vatican admitting to distorting letters of the retired Pope? We're going to tell you in the Seen and Unseen segment. That is wild. Unleashing new havoc. Yes, this time in Houston. Police say they arrested one of its members after he kidnapped a 14-year-old girl. And the suspect led them on a high-speed chase across an interstate. And this all happened yesterday, went on for 30 miles. And it didn't end until the suspect, Leuven Smith-Reyes Sanchez, ran out of gas and surrendered. Police say the kidnapped victim was not in the car during the chase and is okay. Well, critics claim that the Trump administration is targeting MS-13 to demonize immigrants for, importing crime. Statistics, though, do not lie. Here's what the New York Times says. There are now 10,000 MS-13 gang members in the United States. And new reporting by the Washington Post over the weekend reveals how MS-13 is essentially taking over one high school in Suffolk County, New York. Police say the gang has committed 27 murders in the area, all since the wave of unaccompanied illegal immigrant minors began arriving in 2013. Joining us now, a man who's on the front lines of the fight against MS-13, Jay Lanham. He's been great on radio, too, as a director of the Northern Virginia Regional Gang Task Force. Jay, the Washington Post is finally really onto this, I think. They're reporting on what's happened in Long Island, which is stunning. A parent of a young woman who was murdered by MS-13 2 years ago came on our show recently. This is what she said.
I'm feeling the loss of my daughter. I feel it every day. There's not a day, a second, that I don't think about my daughter. And They just don't understand the pain of a parent losing their child to this gang violence.
And this, that was the mom, Evelyn Rodriguez, who was at the State of the Union with the president. Tell us the real situation as you see it in Northern Virginia, communities where you operate in. These were middle class, fairly safe communities when I moved here in 1986. It's a different world now.
Absolutely, and the influx of these gang members, especially MS-13, into the Northern Virginia area has just overwhelmed the resources in the area. The violent crime has just been unheard of, unlike what anyone would expect to ever see. They commit their violence with machetes, which you can just imagine.
Machetes?
That's their favorite weapon of choice. You can just imagine the brutality that exposes to the body.
And when you see the results of this open borders, allowing these unaccompanied minors into the United States, we have 5,000 just in the New York area. There are 5,000 unaccompanied minors. As you pointed out before, I think they're prime targets for MS-13 recruited, are they not?
Absolutely, and we've seen that over the last 2 to 3 years in the amount of violent crime being committed by juveniles, which we didn't used to see. So there have been so many of these kids that have come into the community. They're scared to death. They're put into school. Some of them don't even read and write their own language.
In their own language, thank you.
And these gang members know this. They prey upon them. They exploit the weaknesses, the lack of a family structure, relationship issues. They exploit all of it.
Do you know only 4% of the unaccompanied minors who've come into the United States during that Obama wave, only 4% have been deported? And when this first happened, you remember what Barack Obama said? You're not going to be able to stay here. That was his original comment, but everybody stayed here. So we have thousands upon thousands of previously unaccompanied minors kind of rolling around the United States, some with sponsors, some not, and not all of them are gang members, obviously. But let me show you what is happening in Texas, where we had this high-speed chase. The Texas Public Safety Commission has listed the most lethal gangs in Texas, and this is last July, the report that came out. Here they are. Tango Blast, it's another gang, predominantly Latino gang. The Latin Kings has been around for years. Texas Mexican Mafia, another horrific gang. And MS-13. Okay, MS-13 is number 4. Deadly because of the cartel membership and the cartel connection to these gangs. Tell us why that drives the violence.
Well, MS-13 started because they were protecting themselves from the Mexican Mafia. Now we're finding they tend to work with the Mexican Mafia because the cartels are pushing the drugs across the border, including the heroin and the fentanyl. And they're working together, Mexican Mafia, MS-13, and even outlaw motorcycle gangs to distribute these drugs throughout the United States.
So drugs are a huge part of this. How big is human trafficking in MS-13?
It's large, it's difficult to prosecute, and what's unfortunate is most of these girls involved are brainwashed and they don't see themselves as victims. And it's a hard case to prosecute and to investigate because of that reason.
And how do the police, who many times are understaffed, overworked, underpaid, and they're going up against one of the most brutal gangs in the world, not just in the world?
It's difficult. It's
so ridiculous that this has happened to these beautiful parts of the United States. Suffolk County, bedroom community in New York, Northern Virginia, Gaithersburg, Maryland. I mean, these are like middle class, safe communities.
And it's a fact. MS-13 is the fastest growing gang in the United States, and the propensity for violence is very high.
And by the way, President Trump specifically called them out over the weekend when he did that rally in Pennsylvania. I'm glad he did, keeping that issue front and center. Jay, thank you so much. And keep up the great work. And up next, a Washington Post columnist, check this out, advocates aborting children with Down syndrome, and the Vatican is misrepresenting a letter from Pope Benedict to the media. What's happening there? We're going to explain it all in our Seen and Unseen segment with Raymond Arroyo. Stay there. What's really going on behind the big cultural stories of the day. And here now to fill us in is Fox News contributor and best-selling author Raymond Arroyo. All right, Raymond, let's start with this columnist for the Washington Post, Ruth Marcus, who used to just focus on politics and I think the court a little bit. And now she wrote a column about, you know, if she had a Down syndrome child, she would have aborted the child.
Right. Well, the title was, I would have aborted a fetus with Down syndrome. Women need the right, which is terrifying. But she goes in and she talks about when she had 2 pregnancies and she took the Down syndrome test. And then she writes of her own pregnancies, I'm going to be blunt here. That was not the child I wanted, she said, if it had been positive. That was not the child or the choice I would have made. You can call me selfish or worse, but I am in good company. That evidence is clear that most women confronted with the same unhappy, big blunder, black eye for the Vatican. There was a letter they released, we'll put a picture of it up, from Pope Benedict affirming that Pope Francis and he are in continuity, internal continuity.
Oh, so no doctrine is changing. Don't worry. There's no change coming. There's
but see that letter they released?
Yeah.
They smudged out the end of it so you couldn't read what was next. What people don't realize is those 11 books of theology that you see on the right-hand side of your screen, this was designed to bolster Pope Francis's theological heft. And here you have Pope Benedict saying, we are in continuity. Turns out, if you read the rest of the letter, which no one could read until today, it said, I don't have time to read the book, so I really can't pass judgment on his theological virtues. Turns out they completely misrepresented what Pope Benedict said.
Wait a second. Well, Raymond, for all the people watching out there who are, you're not Catholic, and you're like, well, Vatican, what is this all about? The Da Vinci Code stuff. But you have...
It's not that bad. There's no albinos running around.
You have two popes, okay? You can't have two popes.
Well,
I know we had
one has resigned and retired.
But that was always going to cause a problem. I mean, that's like you're dealing with two popes.
It doesn't cause a problem if you don't need the former pope to vouch for you. And apparently now the Vatican feels it would help Pope Francis.
All right. Can I get in a separate topic that we're going to do this? I'm going to do this in the next segment, but I want your view on this before Hollywood is now trying to cleanse itself of Harvey Weinstein completely, so they're doing these inclusion riders in contracts, in their production contracts. They have to represent people of all backgrounds in films, in front of the camera, behind the camera. So people with disabilities, people from different ethnicities, different gender.
So I'll be looking for albino popes and people with receding hairlines.
But Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, I'm going to be talking about it. But do you think this is going to really change filmmaking for the better?
No, this is a CYA move. But you'll get into it.
I just had to get your take on that.
We'll discuss it later.
All right. So this is what I'm going to get into next. So these Hollywood stars think they found the ticket to solve all their problems. We're going to tell you the latest. And it might make films even more wacky. And fallout continues to ripple across the entertainment landscape. Hollywood thinks it's found a quick fix to save its reputation. Well, remember Oscar night? It was a total bomb, featuring a parade of actors trying to shame all of us Americans over our supposed sexism, bigotry, and xenophobia. Well, it resulted in the least watched Academy Awards ever. But one Hollywood star thinks she has the answer. Well, the hot new catchphrase in Hollywood is called an inclusion rider. Think of it as affirmative action for films. Best Actress winner Frances McDormand launched the movement, really popularized it, in remarks after the Oscars.
Has always been available to all, everybody that does a negotiation on a film, an inclusion rider, which means that you can ask for and or demand at least 50% diversity in not only the casting, but also the crew. And so the fact that I just learned that after 35 years of being in the film business, we're not going back.
Okay, we're not going back. Well, let the bean counting begin. Like, producers, be warned. If your movie is not sufficiently diverse from cast to crew, your star may sick the PC police on you. Well, the concept is catching fire in Tinseltown, and all the kids want to do it. A USA Today headline blared, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, join Hollywood stars in adopting inclusion riders. Wait a minute. This Ben Affleck?
Let's do a Janet Jackson stunt. Let's scare them off. Should we do a Janet Jackson thing? Are you wearing your nipple ring?
I'm sorry. We couldn't resist. Yeah, so the perps of the past are now the diversity patrol of the future. And how would this work exactly? Like, Hollywood loves to virtue signal its diversity, but it's actually one of the most intolerant clubs in all of America. So will that inclusion rider cover underrepresented groups in Hollywood, like, let's say, people of faith, conservatives, and pro-lifers? Don't hold your breath. Memo to Hollywood. People are skipping your art house films because they lack diversity. Well, what do I mean? The characters you sell us don't look or act like the people in the seats. So if you really cared about your industry, you drop the agenda, stop making niche, these art house type films, and embrace